Hello and welcome to the Comms Collective, the podcast that puts communications leaders in the mission-led world where they belong, centre stage. I'm your host, Vishni Sontu. I've spent more than 20 years working in communications, from campaigns and crisis comms to leading big brand moments in the charity and public sector. And if there's one thing I know, that is comms professionals are often behind the scenes, but their work shapes everything. That's why I created this podcast, to bring their voices, stories, and hard-won lessons to the front. Every episode, I'll be joined by a director of comms or a head of comms or a sector leader who will share what it takes to make comms work. The highs, the lows, the wish I'd knowns, and the strategies that help us keep going in a world where budgets are squeezed and expectations are sky high. We'll talk about strategy, we'll talk about inclusive storytelling, internal comms, crisis comms, and how we look after ourselves and our teams when the pressure's on. So whether you're leading comms or just starting out in the sector or simply curious about what goes on behind the scenes, you're in the right place. Today, I'm thrilled to kick off things with Guy Abraham, Strategic Comms and Campaigns Lead for Haringey Council in North London. We'll be talking about Guy's career, what makes him tick, and what's next on his journey. So let's dive in. Guy is an award-winning brand and communications lead with over 12 years experience working on major programs for the world's most interesting organizations, including NGOs, What Three Words, Landau and Finch, Save the Children, Oxfam, and now Haringey Council, while he's still consultancy in a freelance capacity at BrandGuy. He's passionate about improving systems and collaborating with organizations and people who are creating positive change in the world. Outside of work, Guy enjoys cooking, boxing, drumming, and singing badly. I look forward to hearing more about singing badly. Hi, Guy. Welcome to the podcast.
Hey Vish, how you doing?
Good, thank you. And I'm really pleased that you're on today and my second guest. So a real
Yeah,
kind of landmark for me. And for the listeners out there, Guy and I used to work together at Save the Children. So I'm glad to hear what he's been doing since then.
yeah, really excited to be on the podcast and yeah,
Brilliant.
just share and catch up.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about your career journey. How did you find your way into comms?
Yeah, so I started off my career in Oxfam actually, and didn't start in the communications area, it was in policy and advocacy really, and worked on some really interesting campaigns. One called Behind the Brands, which is all about sustainability and looking at supply chains within big, fast-moving consumer goods brands like Unilever, Mondelez, and that's what got me really interested in kind of consumer psychology and looking at behavior change. And then a role at Save the Children popped up, which kind of brands and communications kind of coordinates. Kickstarted the whole career really, and that's where I met people like you, but also really interesting senior leaders who came from quite big sort of fast-moving consumer goods companies like Unilever, where I've ended up learning my trade in I guess both the brand world, where I ended up working on relaunching Save the Children's kind of brand globally in 29 markets. And then from there, kind of understanding more about communications, but also marketing, and looking at how we can build in our fundraising capacity, as well as evangelizing Save the Children message and what it stands for in lots of different markets. So that's how it all kickstarted. And then, yeah, moved into brand agencies, doing all sorts, destination branding to working on, new packaging for fancy brands, then also working on really interesting charitable, I guess, campaigns or rebranding exercises. And after my stint at agencies, where it was just really intense, I think had a lot of fun, but it was quite hard work. I ended up working for a company called What Three Words, which is a tech startup for 3 years. Also with another cohort of Save the Children people. So big up Michelle. Done if you're listening, and worked on everything. I mean, it's really great with startups. You learn so much on the job, and you get stuck into lots of different areas of learning. And I did everything from just doing quick fire sort of content projects to major scale sort of TV campaigns in multiple markets like South Korea, Japan as well as the UK. And then yeah, I'm now at Haringey Council. So I've kind of pivoted a lot of times, but I think what's driven me is values. And I think physically, like I get unwell, I've learned if I'm not working somewhere is aligned to my values and kind of the impact and work that I'm making. And I think what's great about living in Tottenham and also working for local councils who are able to really affect change communications wise. I think there's a lot of challenges within the sector. A lot of services don't really understand how to communicate. And I think it's such a big part of what we do to get people information fast and in the right way. And I've been there for nearly 3.5 years now. And then on top of that, I do, as you mentioned, sort of consultancy around brand and marketing. I've worked with places like Age Scotland or Access Social Care and sort of a few smaller startups. And yeah, it's just really enjoying it.
Fantastic. And I think, as you say, values are really important. I think you and I are both similar in that way of, we have to like what we do. We have to be passionate about what you're out there marketing and communicating about in order to do a really good job.
Yeah.
And, I'm sure a lot of our listeners are in the same position. And maybe it means that we have a tougher time because budgets are constraints. I mean, what do you say your challenges are? What have you faced during your career when you're working on these type of organizations?
Yeah, I think budgets is definitely the first one, but I think that also allows you to be kind of creative and see where you can land, seeing some of the work that you've done around the second day and the work we did in Syria and looking at ways of trying to create virality by being creative is really interesting. And I think for me, I've always liked to go try and understand about being strategic. I think a lot of organizations tend to be quite tactical with how they communicate. And I think if we really strip it back and go back to square one and really trying to reframe the way we kind of consolidated one position or one message versus having multiple messages that go out and multiple channels, it's all about kind of stripping it back and going back to the core of what an organization is. And then starting from there, yeah, budget's always a challenge. And I think from a personal one, it is about having values can sometimes be really hard because I think if I potentially look at my career trajectory, I could be in a more senior position now. And that's what I'm also proud about. But I think sometimes you can mirror yourself against other people who are in the commercial sector, in director roles and all very kind of senior roles. And I think it's always remembering who you are and being able to create that impact regardless of where you go. I think that's, I don't know if you feel the same, but that's definitely a challenge, particularly within sort of the non-for-profit sector.
Yeah, I think absolutely. We don't do it for the money, definitely not. But, what you get out of it, I think, and knowing that you've made a difference to somebody's life and things like that, I think is incredible. Well done on that. And who do you think has influenced your approach to comms the most? Are there particular people that stand out to you that have really helped you think about comms in a different way?
Yeah, there was two key moments. One at Save the Children where I really understood, started with like brief writing. So, and Jonathan Morley, who's at Save the Children and, has worked for Unilever and Bacardi and Carl, really helped me simplify a lot of what I was doing and not using jargon or briefs down to a page and starting to think kind of strategically and sort of looking at 3 to 5 year vision setting and seeing a bigger picture and also looking at how you sell in a vision to an organization. And that really gave me stepping stones to think more strategically. And that was a big moment. Another moment was whilst at Watford, the head of the team at the time really helped me focus on what my strengths were. And I think a lot of times you get called out for kind of, not like called out, but people focus on areas of weakness and how you improve that. But I think she flipped it so that I was actually, how can we enhance your strengths because those are your weapons of power of such. Mine was very much around like kind of people and building skills that way, and ended up working on some really interesting projects which were focused around case study stories, but bringing a lot of our users or even staff on an experience and a journey, like if that was an employer program or to develop what we called our Voices program at the time, was really working with fans of What Three Words and getting them involved in case studies to pitch to press and media. So I think those are the kind of two big sort of moments which I've done. And so, yeah, playing into my strengths now a lot more and always thinking strategically.
And that's a great way to look at it. And like you say, often the assessments or the kind of yearly reviews look at negative things or how you can improve. But actually, if somebody would take our superpowers, like you say, or the bits that we're strongest at and help us make that even stronger, gosh, where
Yeah.
would we be? And how would that help a team, for example? So I think, yeah, that's a brilliant way of looking at it. How would you describe your kind of leadership style and how has it evolved in your career?
Yeah, I think a big one, I mean, for me, the most important leadership style is empathy. I think that's number one. You need to be an empathetic leader and demonstrate leadership in a way that you trust and care about your staff, but also the way that you're delivering against that. I've seen that in action when you do see empathetic leaders, because if you can be visionary and drive organizational change, but if you're not bringing people along that journey, you're not going to get there. And I think, yeah, it feels to me like now more than ever, empathy is so important, because, you know, it's a really complex world out there. And I think it all kickstarted during COVID. And I also saw a shift in the startup I was working at, What Three Words, why do you feel like the leadership became a lot more empathetic, and I think has actually, you know, just I think supported a lot more of the work, and felt more comfortable approaching kind of leaders who had kind of shifted from that, not saying scary, but more like, you know, you can feel uncomfortable approaching leaders in that way. So I've kind of learned from that and trying to take that man-to one, because at the end of the day, we're all humans. Having an empathetic, centered approach, I think, is so important in understanding people's behavior and how you're driving individuals to succeed. And I think that ties in again into strengths, because when you're hiring people, you don't necessarily need to hire people that are similar to you, but are different and got different strengths. And that can help broaden a team's function and capabilities. And that empathy that you have, you can help guide and drive in a way that builds a culture within the team, but also broadly within the organization. I'm also a bit of a hype person as well. I think it's really important to hype people up. Positive reinforcement works, but also hyping people is so important. As humans, we need to feel loved, but also share gratitude when people do good work. And why not keep reinforcing that message?
Yeah. I love what you said about that you need different people, not people like you in a team, that everyone brings different things. I think that's what inclusivity is all about, isn't it? And diversity, really. That there's so many people that are out there can do different things. One can be better than the other. Like, we don't need everyone to look or sound the same.
And Haringey Council is the most multicultural place I've ever worked. And, you know, I think it's really interesting because, to your point, you learn and gain so many different perspectives from people's life experiences. Even the other day, I had something which I was like, that's interesting. I wouldn't have thought about it that way based on my background and my experience. And knowing that and having someone in the team who's seen it from a different point of view makes the work of the output all the better. And, you know, particularly with Haringey, which is such a diverse borough, we're having people that reflect the communities inside and flipping it outside, then, you know, we're able to recognise and deliver the work that will reach those seldom heard communities in the right way. So I think it's a no-brainer, but I think there's a lot, I think, lack of awareness. I wouldn't say privilege is the word, but I think if you don't have that empathetic leadership, maybe you won't think about it or come across it.
Yeah, that's a really good shout, actually, because I'm a Tottenham girl, so I'm a fan of Haringey Council anyway. What you said about the differences in people and privilege is a big thing. And I think in the not-for-profit sector, the charity sector, we could be a little bit privileged in some ways. You know, when we're moving now, it's becoming more diverse, but it's still, I think, got a way to go. And certainly they could probably learn from local authorities that are getting people that look like their community in their staff as well, because how else do you communicate with that community if you don't have lived experience or you don't understand where they're coming from? And then it feels like a little bit tokenistic otherwise, doesn't it?
Definitely. I think we roughly have about 25 to 30% of staff that actually live in the borough as well. And I would agree on that. There's challenges right across when it comes to representation. I just hope organisations like people like us who are pushing that agenda, hoping to reshape the way we can create more equitable workplaces in the future.
And you mentioned people like us. For our listeners, it's a not-for-profit organisation that are, highlighting and representing people of colour or other differences actually in the creative industry. So that's everything from agencies to freelancers to all sorts of things. And there was a fantastic event in September, and I was lucky enough to speak at that, but there were sort of 11 other people that did fantastic presentations, and it was amazing to see what people are actually doing out there and things that we don't know about. So shining a light on it was, I think, really helpful. And so organizations like people like us, there needs to be more of them, and there needs to be, to support everybody who's underrepresented, really.
Definitely.
So I want to talk a little bit about your achievements. What one campaign can you think of that you're particularly proud of, and why?
Yeah. I was thinking about it. It's just so hard because I think there's been a lot of kind of council ones that have weirdly given me, like, I've worked on, major brand projects that have, like Kellogg's or General Electric, and even I developed the destination brand for the country of Azerbaijan, which is rightly or wrongly could be perceived as problematic in some cases. It is, but also I think some of the corporate projects have given me a really powerful understanding in the way business and the corporate world works. And also, I think there can be some challenges around working in countries that have their own difficulties. But I think what's really interesting and what I love about kind of brand and campaigns is that it is about people, essentially. The destination brand for Azerbaijan was really interesting. I got to meet people who are in the blue zone, over 100 years old, and also people that worked in the entertainment industries or in farming or in agriculture and in the food businesses. And we were able to really basically develop a brand and a campaign around the country. So from a personal point of view, that was always something that I loved because it was such an amazing project. I think from what I've been doing recently at Haringey, even simple things like we put a few years ago, a sign-ups before I joined were about 50 to 100. And then because, again, using a campaign and marketing approach and doing it locally, we were able to attract over 500 people. And to me, that was, even though it's small scale, it just felt so personal. And I felt, to be honest, it was all down to the approach that we took. And the fact that from 100 to 500 people after that 1 year, I think just showed that what's the power of campaign can do. But yeah, lots of really interesting stuff. But those always spring to mind.
And on the flip side, what's been the toughest challenge that you faced in comms? And then how did you handle that?
So I think what 3 words was always so many different types of challenges that threw up in a startup, because what 3 words you're trying to communicate this idea and a product that people might not be aware of, or it's a very new, dividing the world into 3-meter squares and giving each square a unique 3-word address and kind of trying to sell that into an organized business or sell that to the media and stuff. There were a lot of challenges around how do you grow the business itself and which markets do you operate in. I think, we had so many challenges around communicating what 3 words in markets like Southeast Asia, and especially like South Korea and Japan. And, I think there's a lot of, when you're delivering these multi-million pound campaigns, for them to be successful. And I think there are times that struggled in terms of pressure in some ways, but also just making that we were getting the results. I mean, I don't know if you agree, but I think sometimes, again, if you think about the commercial sector, sometimes that can be quite hard. Versus for me, coming back to kind of values and working in sort of charitable organizations or NGOs, it's sort of like everything really, really matters, but to a point of, the impact that you're making. So yeah, I think what 3 words was a challenging time in that respect, but had lots of really great moments, really amazing projects.
I'm thinking about back to kind of like leadership, I guess. And if someone's starting out in a leadership role now or hoping to, what advice would you give them? What advice would you give them when they're stepping into that role?
It's hard. I think the first one is just knowing that you have the confidence. I think sometimes stepping into leadership, you can not feel a bit out of breath, but you sort of, and it's hard depending on who you are as an individual, but just being confident and knowing that you are there, like you've reached it, and Now this is your opportunity to shine and bring your skills into the foresight. So I think for me, it's kind of just getting that leader to remember that, to be confident and to drive your vision. I think sometimes confidence can be lost over a period of time, especially when you're stepping up into a bigger role. I guess another thing is having the opportunity to listen to others within an organization and get a sense of the challenges, but also the opportunities. Because, when you're stepping into a role as a leader, you need to bring a lot of people on that journey and setting your vision and where you want to go. And I guess tying into that empathy that I was talking about earlier, is kind of understanding senior leadership's vision and where they want the communications or next steps of the next sort of 18 months, where you kind of building that bridge between staff and leadership, learning and listening, and then starting to dissect and set your vision and strategy. So I think those would be my sort of two things: is confidence and listening and learning, and then taking the action and building upon that.
I think, as you said about taking people on that journey with you is really important. So taking that team with you, but also knowing that you're not always going to have the answers, but you'll build a team that can have the answers.
Yeah,
You have to be able to bring the team together, the right team, I think,
definitely.
is the other big one for me. Moving on to the future of comms, you've worked in a lot of agencies, like you said, and now in the kind of public sector. But how do you think the role of comms is going to be changing in the next sort of 5 to 10 years?
How do we know? I mean, we've got stuff coming out from OpenAI around digital imagery that is like videos that are quite scary, to the point of people are going to be able to create content that we don't know if we can validate if it's going to be real or not, kind of the classic sort of AI take. But it's going to be really challenging and confusing for a lot of people. And I think the world of communications and misinformation, I really don't know what that's going to look like in 5 years' time. And I think a lot, at the moment, they talk about job losses and stuff, but I think at this moment in time, areas, particularly in the comms world, AI has helped enhance in some ways, particularly in my role, building strategic comms plans faster, or being able to adapt at a quicker pace. And we're already operating at a really, I think, fast level. When things used to take a week, we're turning things around in a day now. And so I think those challenges around, what the future looks like, around, the level of pace, what's going to happen within the kind of world of artificial intelligence, misinformation, and also how we're going to, reach people in the future in the way that people are going to understand that it's real. I think for me is an area of unknown. But I think what is going to be important, or what I want to certainly imbue in my work, or we need to pitch for, is, real people, real stories, and kind of build on hope. Not only getting a bit deep about it, but I think that is real. And we're seeing fraction communities, and the power, the role of communications can be incredibly powerful. And we need that bridge to bring people together. So that's certainly what my aim will be. But I think the landscape in 5 years is going to be very different, very different.
And, you've mentioned AI, but you've also, divisiveness and misinformation. And I think for me, I think with AI, you can understand. I think at the point at the moment is people are scared of it, but let's understand it, let's embrace it, and figure out how it can help us in terms of our work. Like you said, it can speed up, kind of like where you would spend days and days on a plan, where it could be done in it, which is helpful. But the misinformation side, I think, I would say, is huge. The fact that people are reading things now not on the news but on social, and where are they getting their information and who's it coming from? Even, things like YouTube, you've got loads and loads of channels on YouTube that are spouting something. How do you verify that as an individual? How do you verify that that's correct information? There's no way of doing that. And it's a question of belief. And if you're not very techie, you'll think, yeah, that's exactly what the government is saying, or that's what so and so is saying. I guess for us as communicators, our role and our job is to make sure that we keep pushing those human stories, like you said, authenticity, reminding people why we're here, And I imagine, like, for a council where you have got divide sometimes, I imagine Haringey is pretty cool and pretty diverse, but there are some other councils out there around the UK where they are being challenged on this quite a lot. You know, having to do certain things to try and bring people together, bring their community together.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think, it's gonna be, I guess, challenging now. Yeah, what does that space look like in the future for even us in comms, because we talk about roles being replaced by AI, and it's so cliche to really talk about that. But I think there is, depending on who moves in power and the role that local government will play and how much central government will give money-wise to local authorities, there's talk of reducing civil servants and all the rest of it. So I think it's much like watch this space. But I think more now than ever, and I've got a friend who'd always said this, campaigning and pushing for progressive communications, hope-based communications, having facts and information is going to be pivotal moving forward.
Okay, so just a final thing from you. How do you switch off from work and how do you recharge? I think it's really interesting to find out from people what you do in your spare time to take away from the kind of workload.
Yeah, I actually used to have a big problem with not being able to do that. But I think over the years, particularly since shifting at Haringey Council, I am kind of able to do it in different ways. A bit like you were saying about singing badly earlier. My friends and I discussed this, and I think for a lot of people, it's really important to have things outside work that you're passionate about, and that hobbies and other milestones in your life. For me, that's about developing more projects on the side that are not just focused with work. So I'm doing a cooking course at the moment. I've been doing that for the last 6 to 7 weeks, and again, really leaning into my passions. I do boxing once a week, try and play football when I can, and try new things and not be afraid to do new things. At the beginning of this year, end of last year, a friend and I started going to choir, which I've never thought in my lifetime I'd ever do, but ended up really enjoying it. Turns out I've got a very low voice, and it's been a lot of fun. So I think, for me, it's really important. Work is work. We do it every day. It's a big part of our lives, but there's so much more out there that we can kind of learn and stretch ourselves creatively. And again, kind of, as I was saying earlier, leaning into strengths, but also like leaning into your passions and really kind of doubling down on those. I'm not saying I cook Michelin star food, but I feel like I'm becoming a better cook. It's my kind of therapy. That's my meditation. Sort of me. I know a lot of people find it really hard cooking, and it's actually more stressful. And then those things help me when I kickstart the day, because I know all those passions and I'm seeing results. What about you?
I love cooking.
Yeah.
Putting on a good podcast while I'm cooking as well.
Nice, yeah.
My family are probably the important things for me. I'm quite lucky that my family aren't that far. So seeing them quite a lot, nieces. And this podcast is a bit of a hobby for me, learning how to do that a bit and all the technical skills that you need. But work is work, and we have to switch off and realize that even if it's consultancy or whatever, that you need a bit of downtime, a bit of social time as well. I think that's what we've been missing, a lot of social time.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're quite similar in that way. Like, we love people and interacting, and that's where I get my energy from. If it's all no time to have fun, it's not good for you. It's not good for your body.
Great. Thank you, guys.
I was absolutely thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
If people want to connect with you, where will they find you?
Just find me on LinkedIn.
That's it for this episode of the Comms Collective. A huge thank you to Guy for sharing his insights and experiences. If you've enjoyed today's conversation, don't forget to follow the podcast on your favorite app so you never miss an episode. It would mean the world to me if you could rate and review the show. It helps more comms professionals like you discover these stories. And of course, join the conversation online, share this episode on social media, and tag us at the Comms Collective. Thank you for listening. I'm Vishnu Sontu, and I would love to bring you more honest, inspiring conversations. See you next time.